everyone. Welcome to the Smart Women Savvy Money podcast series. My name is Derenda King, and I'm one of the financial advisors here at Urban Wealth Management, where we focus on helping our clients get their financial lives in gear. Now, if you are tuning in for the first time, we want to thank you for taking time out of what is presumably a very busy schedule to listen in. And if you are a returning listener, we want to thank you as well for taking time out of your busy schedules as well to tune in yet again. If you're a new listener, our podcasts provide both financial as well as lifestyle information, and they are designed to be short. Hence the 30 minutes, yet informative and impactful. We offer them 11 times out of the year. The only month that we don't offer them is during the month of December. And if you want to view upcoming podcasts or events that we may have, you can simply visit our website and click on our events tab. And you will see the events that we have, or pardon me, the podcast that we have coming up. You can see that today's topic is on college planning. And then bringing up the rear in October and November, we will have guest experts sharing pertinent and valuable information on impact and sustainable investing. We also encourage you to take a look at our blogs. We have quite a bit of content here on a variety of different topics written by our guest hosts as well as by the advisors here at Urban Wealth Management. And as of late, we've been providing quite a few tips on how to navigate all of the uncertainty during the pandemic, as you can see here. And then also, because today's topic is on college planning, I wanted to highlight a blog series called College Corner, in which I share tips on college planning. And if you want to see what has been written thus far, you can go to our list of subjects here and simply click on College Corner, and you can see all the tips provided thus far. So having said that, we are constantly adding content because we want to make sure that the information that we are providing is relevant and beneficial for you and your respective families. And so you may want to check back regularly, perhaps at least once a month, all right? Now, as I mentioned, today's topic is on college planning, and I actually have the pleasure of hosting today. And so let me share my screen with all of you. All right. And more specifically, what I'm going to be addressing is college saving and funding myths, or debunking some myths, if you will. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic in particular is because this probably goes without saying, but saving for college and funding it can undoubtedly seem like an impossible goal or task for families and for parents, especially when you factor in the steadily rising cost to obtain a college degree. Yet it's still a primary goal for a lot of parents. However, there are a lot of myths surrounding this topic, and many of them, if not addressed, can really discourage families from pursuing and ultimately achieving whatever their educational goals may be for their children. So my goal today is to help you separate fact from fiction and share a light on some of the college saving myths to ultimately help you in your college planning journey. Now, before diving into the myths, I wanted to talk a little bit about college savings accounts. Now, when it comes to saving for higher education expenses, there are a lot of options that are available to families. Two of the most common are your 529 plans and your Coverdell education savings accounts. And so I briefly wanted to share a few characteristics of each. Now, when it comes to federal income tax rules, unfortunately for both accounts, neither of the contributions are tax deductible. However, your earnings grow tax deferred, and any withdrawals that are used for qualified education expenses will be tax-free. Okay, and you can see here examples of qualified educational expenses. The ones that both accounts share in common include tuition, fees, and books. Also, a really wonderful benefit that we now have with 529s, thanks to the Secure Act, is the ability to use the withdrawals to repay student loan debt of the beneficiaries of these accounts, up to a maximum of $10,000. And so that's a really great new benefit. When it comes to contribution limits for the 529, the IRS doesn't specify an annual contribution limit. However, there is what's called an aggregate contribution limit, and each state sets their own limit. And in California, that limit is $529,000. So basically what that means is that's the maximum amount that one can put in a 529 plan. Now for Coverdale's, there is an annual contribution limit, and that is $2,000 per year per beneficiary from all combined sources. And what I mean by combined sources is that, let's say hypothetically that there are parents and grandparents contributing to this account. Well, the maximum amount in total that can be contributed from both parties is $2,000 per year per child. Now, one of the many benefits for saving for your child's college education is that the contributions are considered gifts for tax purposes. And so gifts totaling up to $15,000 per child or per beneficiary will qualify for what's called the annual gift tax exclusion. Now also, this is really another benefit to the 529s that a lot of parents and really a lot of grandparents use. And it's actually a great estate tax planning strategy, and it's called the 5-year election. Some people refer to it as super funding. And essentially what that means is that for single taxpayers, they can front load a 529 up to a maximum of $75,000. And for married couples, up to a maximum of $150,000, $75,000 for each spouse. So this is the maximum amount that can be given at one time to fund a 529 account. But you need to make sure that you're treating the contributions as if they were spread out over a 5-year period. Now, when it comes to income restrictions, there are none for the 529 plans, which is great for your high income earning families. But for the Coverdale, there are restrictions. So families, only families, I should say, with a modified adjusted gross income at or below $95,000 for single filers and $190,000 for married filing jointly filers are eligible to contribute the full annual $2,000 amount. Now, another thing that's really important to note is that these assets are considered the assets of the parents for financial aid purposes, and so they are therefore factored into the financial aid formulas, and I'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. All right, so let's dive into these myths. The first one being, my child will get financial aid if I don't save. So many parents mistakenly think that their kids will not receive financial aid if they set aside funds for college. And while it's true that parents' assets, including these college savings plans, can reduce financial aid assistance to some extent, the impact is not as significant as one might think or as many might think. Now, before I go any further, I think it's important to explain a little bit about the two most common financial aid applications or forms. The first one being the Fafsa, which stands for the Free Application for Student Aid, and the other being the CSS Profile, which stands for the College Scholarship Service. Now, the FAFSA is the universal first step to applying for financial aid, meaning it's the application that everyone must complete if they want to find out if they're eligible for financial aid, even for some federal student loans, okay? The CSS Profile, on the other hand, is primarily for your private colleges and universities. There are a little over 200. There's also a handful of public colleges and universities that also require it. And one of the main differences, other than this one being primarily for private colleges, is that the CSS Profile also dives deeper into a family's finances, and so they're going to ask more questions about the family's income and assets. Now, both of these applications count college savings plans into the financial aid formulas. However, the reason why I said that the impact is minimal is because, as I mentioned, these are considered parental assets or assets of the parents, which means that a student's financial aid package would only be reduced by up to 5.64% of the account value for the FAFSA and up to 5% for the CSS Profile. So let me put that into perspective by providing an example. Let's say, hypothetically, you had $5,000 in a college savings plan. For the FAFSA, that means that $282 of that $5,000 would have to be earmarked for college education expenses. That's 5.64% of the $5,000. And for the CSS Profile, $250 would have to be earmarked for college expenses. That's 5% of the $5,000, okay? Now, obviously, well, let me back up. So this is why I said that the impact is minimal, okay? Because these amounts are relatively small. Now, obviously, the more money you have saved, the more of an impact, this will have on your financial aid eligibility. But here's what I would encourage you to ponder or think about. Would you rather be in the driver's seat or have full control or at least some control over funding your child's college education, or would you rather be at the mercy, if you will, of financial aid offices and hope that you'll get enough financial aid to fund your child's college education? Okay, something to think about. The other thing to really note that's important is that loans are considered financial aid. Okay, so it's very conceivable that a child could qualify for nothing but student loans. Okay, and so this would be a case in which having savings set aside for college can really come in handy, okay? All right, the next myth. If I can't save $100 or more per month, then I shouldn't even bother to start saving. Hopefully you know that the answer to this is false. A lot of parents as well as grandparents think that they need to come up with a big chunk of money to start saving. But the reality is that that's not the case. Some savings plans allow you to start with as low as $25 a month or even $15 a month, okay? All right, the next myth. I believe we're on myth number 3. Only parents can open a college savings plan. Hopefully, again, you know the answer to that is false because I've been mentioning grandparents quite a bit. So anyone can open a college savings plan, and more importantly, anyone can contribute to the account. All right, myth number 4. College savings plans can only be used for a 4-year college, okay? The answer to this is false, right? Withdrawals from a 529 or a cover deal for that matter, as long as, again, they're used for qualified educational expenses, can be used at any college, any university, any vocational school, or any other eligible post-secondary educational institution. Okay. All right, myth number 5. If my child doesn't go to college, I will lose the money in my college savings plan. So here's what parents and families need to know to prevent this from happening. In both the 529 as well as the cover deal, the owners of those accounts can change the beneficiary to another eligible family member with no tax penalty. Okay, an eligible family member can be a sibling, can be a step sibling, can be an aunt, an uncle, a nephew, a niece, cousin, first cousin, I believe. There are different rules for each account on who counts as an eligible family member. But one way, again, to prevent this from happening is to just transfer the funds to another eligible family member. Now, there is one caveat when it comes to the cover deal accounts. You have to transfer that funds before the original beneficiary reaches the age of 30. All right, myth number 6. Anything not used for education expenses is subject to taxes and a 10% penalty. Is this true or is it false? Well, the answer to this is true. The IRS will consider any non-qualified withdrawals, again, any withdrawals that are not used for qualified educational expenses as taxable income. And more specifically, those withdrawals will be subject to income tax on their earnings, as well as a 10% penalty will also be applied. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about some myths as they pertain to financial aid in particular. Now, before talking about those myths, there's a really important concept or term, I should say, that families need to be familiar with, and that is the expected family contribution, or the EFC, okay? The EFC represents an estimate of what a household or what a family should be able to pay or contribute towards a child's college education for that particular year in college. And there are a number of factors that go into determining that amount, or that go into that formula. I've listed a few here. They include income, the non-retirement funds of the parents, education accounts, those 529s and cover deals, family size, marital status, number of kids in college, etc. There are a number of factors. There are over 50. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this amount, or this number, if you will, it helps determine if you will qualify for financial aid, but it's not the actual dollar amount that you will end up paying. In very rare cases, families may pay less, but more often than not, it's the minimum that families will end up having to pay. Now, when should you obtain your EFC? Well, it's important to get your EFC as soon as possible. I have here on the screen freshman year or earlier. And I will share information on how you can obtain a complimentary estimated EFC at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's dive into these myths about financial aid. The first one being that the FAFSA is way too long and too complicated to complete, that it's not even worth the trouble. Now, as I mentioned, the FAFSA is the application that everyone must complete if they want to find out if they're eligible for financial aid, even certain federal student loans. Not completing this application would potentially mean that you are leaving money on the table, okay? So what I always recommend to families is that at the very least, complete it for the first year. See what happens, see what you end up getting, and then you can make a more informed decision about whether or not you want to complete it in subsequent years. Okay, so yes, it is indeed worth the trouble. Okay, because you're not going to know if you qualify for financial aid if you don't complete it. All right, the next one. If your family earns too much money, you won't qualify for financial aid. Okay, this is a big one. So here's the thing. Uncle Sam doesn't have an income cutoff limit for financial aid. Okay, so again, the only way that you're going to know if you qualify for financial aid is if you complete the FAFSA. Also, remember that I said when it comes to that EFC, the expected family contribution, there are a number of factors that go into determining that amount. Income is one of them. Now, it's a big one, but there are, as I mentioned, over 50 different factors that go into determining that amount. All right, the next one, I think this is number 3. On myths about financial aid. The FAFSA is the only financial aid form that I need to complete. Maybe, maybe not. As I mentioned, the 2 most common are the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And the CSS profile, again, is primarily for your private colleges and universities. So if your child is planning on applying to private colleges or universities, then the answer to this is no. Because they will have to complete both the FAFSA and the CSS profile, okay? However, if your child is not planning on applying to private colleges or universities or the handful of colleges that require it, then yes, the only application that they'll have to complete is the FAFSA. All right, the next one. The expected family contribution is the exact amount that you will have to pay. So I threw this in here because I wanted to make sure you guys were paying attention, okay? Remember I said that the EFC represents an estimate of what a family should be able to pay, should reasonably be able to pay for their child's college education for that particular year in college. And more often than not, it ends up being the minimum amount that you will have to pay, okay? Myth number 5, I only need to complete the FAFSA once. Unfortunately, the answer to that is false. You have to complete the FAFSA each year that your child is in college. And so if you have multiple kids in college at the same time, then you have to complete the FAFSA until the last child graduates. And the reason for that is because your finances can change from year to year. Just think about the situation that a lot of families are finding themselves in during the pandemic, where parents have lost their jobs or they've experienced a significant reduction in their income, especially when you compare that to, let's say, last year or even the year before. So that's why you have to complete the FAFSA every year. Now, when it comes to the CSS profile, some schools only require it that first year. So you'll have to check with that particular school to see what their policy is regarding that. All right, and the last myth, if the grandparents own the college savings plan, the assets aren't included in the financial aid formula. The answer to that is true, okay? If the grandparent owns the college savings account, then those assets are not factored in or included in the financial aid formulas. However, when it comes to withdrawals, that's a different story, okay? If grandparents take money out of those accounts to give to their grandchild to help pay for their college expenses, then it will be factored in. Not only will it be factored in, but it will be factored in as the student's untaxed income, which can be assessed up to 50%, okay? All right. Also, one other thing I want to say about that, there are some strategies around when grandparents should strategically take money out to help their grandchild pay for their college education expenses. So I just wanted you guys to know that. All right, so now we've reached the end of the presentation. Hopefully I've debunked a few myths that you've heard or that you're familiar with, or that maybe you yourself have held. And so some of you may be thinking, wow, this is a lot of information. Many of you may have additional questions. Many of you may be thinking, you know, what do I do next, or how do I proceed? So I'm here to help. I offer 30-minute complimentary virtual consultations. So if you want to review the various college savings options, or if you have any follow-up questions to any of the myths that I addressed, or if you want to find out how you can obtain a complimentary estimated EFC, or if you just have general questions about college planning or any other financial questions. For example, one of the most common ones that I get from parents with college-bound students is, how do I, you know, save for retirement while also saving for my child's college education? You know, am I on track? So these are the kinds of questions that I can briefly and generally answer during the consultations. So feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. Also in those consultations, I'll share briefly information about our college planning and funding services and how we help families. So again, feel free to reach out to me. This is my direct contact information, my direct phone number. And I will follow up with an email with pertinent information, as well as provide a link to access my calendar so that you can schedule your meeting. Okay, so hopefully that information was helpful. Hopefully you found it beneficial. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to tune in. Remember to check back at our website for updated blogs or additional content, or to view upcoming podcasts that we have throughout the year. Incidentally, I will be posting a blog summarizing summarizing what I covered in the presentation today. So again, thank you to all of you, and until next time, be well and be safe.